Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Village Preservation and Improvement Society's fall member meeting. Appreciate everyone joining on a beautiful, gorgeous Sunday afternoon. We have some VPIS business to do quickly right up front. Quick summary of our activities through this year. And we have a quick election of officers for next year, but then we're going to proceed to our program for today, which is a presentation on climate change issues in Falls Church and on stormwater issues. I'm Jeff Peterson. I'm the president of the Village Preservation Society. And today we want to give you a quick rundown from some of our board members on some of the organization's activities. We've had a very successful year despite the complications of COVID, and we're delighted to be able to report on some pretty substantial progress in some key program areas. First, I'd like to turn to Ruth Rogers for an update, our treasurer, for an update on the VPIS finances. Ruth, you're on mute.
That's good.
Am I on now? Okay, I'll start again. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here and to be able to report on the VPIS finances. We have a very healthy balance in our balances in our checking account and our cash accounts. In our Arbor Day fund, we have $14,400 just waiting for the plans to be approved, and we'll be using that to get started on our Arbor Day monument. And in our tree fund, we have $17,460, which we hold for when the city asks us for money for planting trees. Our neighborhood tree program, it has kind of been on hold, but we're still supplying the city with cash to buy trees to plant within the city. Our year-to-date income is $18,453. Part of that was from t-shirts. Thank you, Allison, and your crew. And membership. 7,000. T-shirts were over $1,000. Membership was $7,331. Thank you, Bonnie, for your excellent reaching out to new members. And we have $5,575 from rain barrel grant reimbursements, $1,400 from Earthwatch fundraising, and $1,500 for the Women's History Walk. Let's see. Our expenses, year-to-date expenses, $17,625. That means we're spending a little bit less than we raised this year, but we, as I said, we have a healthy balance in our contingency accounts. The spending now is on track to stay under our income. Our program expenses are concerts in the park. I don't know if Gordon is on, but thank you, Gordon, for all your hard work on that. $65 were given to musicians who played for our concerts in the park. We had Earthwatch expenditures of $1,191. Rain Smart expenditures of $37.93. Women's History March or Walk was $2,731 outlay, and from the tree fund was $2,349. Our overhead was $696 for membership, administration $578, and our website newsletter $1,200. So we're, as I said, meeting our expenses, even though we weren't able to do our major fundraisers this year or last year. So we're bringing in money from other sources. And thank you all for your support.
Thank you, Ruth. Let's go on to report on our membership for the year from our membership chair, Bonnie Murphy.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to report that membership is strong and growing. I guess I would characterize it as that. We have over 200 members, many of which are new members this year. We did a sort of a membership drive touting the Bradley Jernand book. I don't know if you can all see this. This is Falls Church during the Civil War. And what we did was put these books around the city in a couple of places with membership information included. And we got quite a few new members that way. I do want to say that we have plenty of these books available. And if anybody online today wants one, just get in touch with me or on VPIS.org, you can contact us and we will get you one of these beautiful books. We also are doing our membership mailing. We're going to attempt to do it a little earlier this year, probably early to mid-December. So be on the lookout for the membership mailing. We're going to get it out early, and so we don't compete with some of the end of year, non-profit appeals. So membership is strong, and thank you all. And hopefully there are some new members on. Welcome if you are. That's it.
Great, thanks. And we had a very successful fundraising year. And Allison Miller's going to give us a quick summary of that work.
Okay, well, we launched a pilot project this year. We weren't able to do a lot of our usual Attic Treasures sale and coffee stand fundraisers. So we took a page from the t-shirt campaign that some people at the school did and did a t-shirt campaign. And we ended up netting from the t-shirt campaign, which ran from the spring to the midsummer, over $1,000, as Ruth said, which was great. And as a first year project, I think it was very successful, and I look forward to improving on our process for 2022 and hopefully selling more t-shirts. It'll be a new t-shirt, a new design, limited run like we did this year. And it's possible we may put out another item to sell between now and then. We're not sure yet. The other thing I wanted to mention, since Gordon's not here, is that the concerts in the park from the drinks table perspective, which I worked and Bonnie worked, and I think Mike Volpe had a shift at the drinks table. The drinks table was really successful, and we did sell some t-shirts at the drinks table as well. But the big game changer for us this year is that we were able to take Square for cards. And once we figured out how to do the Square about midway through the concerts in the park this year, we were able to get bigger per transaction sales. So that was a keeper for sure, and definitely something we'll do in the future. And it was really easy to do. So we've broken ground with that, and I'm glad. So fundraising was good this year, and Lorraine and Keith were also part of the t-shirt campaign, and I look forward to working on it again next year.
Great, thank you. This has been a big year for the Neighborhood Tree Program, and Amy Crumpton's going to fill us in on that.
Thank you. I'm Amy Crumpton. I am the volunteer chair for the Neighborhood Tree Program, and I'm also working with the city as the vice chair for the Urban Forestry Commission. So this program fits in with what's going on in the Urban Forestry Commission and with the arborist for the City of Falls Church. This program, if many of you are not familiar with it, has been around since about 2000, the year 2000. And our best guess is that we have planted something like 1,500 trees throughout the city and had a very significant impact on increasing the canopy, the tree canopy in the city to help us lower some of our urban heat problems. The program, as Ruth had mentioned, has been not quite on hold, but definitely not as robust as it has been in the past. Because of COVID, in the past, we would have actual events where we would have a number of volunteers come and we get trees and we plant them, and very much group events. And so because of COVID and those kinds of restrictive issues around having folks work too closely together, we have basically transitioned the program right now into the arborist's office more fully, in the sense that the arborist has gotten working with a contractor to put trees in for us. And VPIS pays for a lot of the trees that are not in the city's right of way, but more fully into people's yards. So we do provide some money to help spread that canopy beyond just the city's right of way. The tree program is really quite popular, and you get a great tree. It's for free, basically. We have in the past, because we had probably almost 1,500 trees planted over 20 something years, probably was like 50 trees per session, either in the spring and then another 50 in the fall. But of late, we've only been doing maybe around 20 or so. And we'd like to see that improve. So the best thing that we can ask is for everyone to, let your neighbors know about this, or if you have room in your yard for a tree, that would be great. Also, if anybody is interested in working on this program with me, I would really love to hear from you, because the administrative back end of this program has kind of shrunk, because we lost Seth Hemingway last year as he moved out of the area, and he was very much a stalwart. But this program used to have more of a steering committee of folks who would help oversee where trees should go and just get the word out. So I welcome anyone's input, or if you want to contact me, I'm actually on this page. My contact information is on this page. So let's see if I can roll down to it, if you can see it. Yes, there it is, amycrumpton@gmail.com. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Amy. I see Gordon has joined us, and Gordon did a great job honchoing the concerts in the park this summer, and he can tell us a little bit about that.
Hi there. I didn't know I had a special invite. I was just watching from the public site. So we had a great summer concert series, a return to Cherry Hill Park. Last summer, we did a remote meeting or remote concert from the basement of Moonshine Society's, one of their person's basements. This year they were live along with some of our old favorites and some new favorites. We even had a Grammy Award-winning musician. When we hired him, he didn't know he was going to be a Grammy Award-winning musician, but then he is one, became one in March. And that guy's name was Lil Maceo. First time ever we've seen people wandering around in the crowd playing. That's what he did. So it was a great concert. We had mixed attendance because it was either really humid or really hot, which is typical Falls Church weather. But it was good to be back in the park. I think my favorite moment was when Andrew Acosta played. It was his first concert back, first concert live performance since the pandemic, and he was quite emotional about it. So that was a favorite moment. So great summer concert. Going to start working on next year soon. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Gordon. We did, as VPIS has been doing for many years, this year we did candidate forums for both the school board and the city council. This year over Zoom, not live as in prior years, but I think very successfully. And thanks to Keith Thurston for coordinating that. And Keith, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about how that went.
Sure. The candidate forums were quite successful. We actually have more attendance when we have them by Zoom than if we had the attendance in person, which I found was really interesting, but I guess the convenience matters. We had really a lot of good questions from not only prepared questions that we partnered with the League of Women Voters, but also those that came in from the audience, where we left 1/3 of the time for that. So it worked out quite well. And I think we contributed our part to the civic society by holding those forums. So overall, went well. Thank you.
Great. And we've had a very busy year with providing input and comment to the city on a range of the major development projects around town. Mary Chavez, our vice president, has been coordinating the VPIS input on these projects, and she can say a few words about how that's going.
Thank you, Jeff. VPIS tries to keep abreast of the pending mixed-use development projects and to add our voice to encourage attractive structures that fit within the community. Areas of focus include adequate green space, maintenance of tree canopy trees, energy efficiency, stormwater concerns, adequate electrical vehicle stations, affordable dwelling units for lower income neighbors, and significant commercial space commitments to permit realistic estimates of city fiscal benefits, among other issues. This year, we have focused on the proposed Founders Row 2 project and Atlantic Realty's proposed One City Center. Both projects are now moving through the city council process. We have sent a letter to council on Founders Row 2. One is pending board action for One City Center, and a summary of the state of play of recent mixed-use projects was included in the VPIS newsletter summer issue. These letters and the newsletter will be available on the VPIS website.
Great. Thank you, Mary. And to wrap up our little program roundup here, I'll just say a couple words very quickly about the Rain Smart program. We're very pleased to partner with the City of Falls Church to provide grants to city residents for rain barrels and for conservation landscapes and rain garden projects. We had a pretty successful year despite COVID with that, and did over grants for over a dozen rain barrels and 3 conservation landscape or rain garden projects. So that's been going very well. We're looking forward to ramping that up somewhat next year when we're out of the worst of COVID and people are more comfortable dealing with landscapers and folks. So that's really a quick summary of some of the major VPIS activities this year. We have one piece of business to do at our annual member meeting, which is do a quick vote on a slate of officers for next year and to update our board members. Keith Thurston has been coordinating that work, and I'll turn it over to Keith.
Jeff, we also have Tree Fest.
Yes, let's come back to that.
Okay.
So on the screens, you should now see, on behalf of the nominations committee, we provide a slate of officers and directors each year. The way our organization is structured is 1/3 of the board of directors ends each year and comes up for reconsideration or filled by new candidates. So this year, the graduating class was of 2021. Our for president, the nominating committees have Jeff Peterson, Mary Chavez, for vice president, treasurer Ruth Rogers. And that one's, if anybody knows a qualified person for treasurer and for to run the QuickBooks, Ruth would like to step down when she can, but bring that forward to us. We'd like to hear that. Recording secretary, Mike Volpe. Correspondence secretary, Melissa Teets. For the board of directors, the group for this year be Amy Crumpton, Mark and Ellen Gross, Chuck Hobby, Allison Miller, and for a one-year term, Sam Beatty and Ellen Gilmore. I move that into nomination and ask for a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor of the slate as nominated, or first I should ask, are there any additional nominations from the floor? Okay, there's a vote on your screen. There's a poll, and all you have to do is click on that poll, yes, yay, or nay, and we'll take the vote electronically.
Oh, wow, this is neat, Keith. Not clicking.
Is anyone else having trouble clicking their button?
Yeah, I can't click.
Yeah, I'm getting host.
We're gonna have to raise our hands.
I think
Okay, so-
panelists cannot vote, unfortunately, I think is what the problem is. I think the poll goes to the attendees.
Yeah,
Okay. So we'll do that, and we'll have the panelists then vote. Are there, for the panelists, all those that are in favor say yay.
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 yay,
Yay.
All
Yay.
those opposed say nay. Hearing none, we'll wait for the electronic vote, and if it is in favor, then all of these members will be elected to the board. Thank you.
Cool.
Okay, thank you, Keith. I see I did fail to mention, and I want to go back just very briefly to remind folks that we have an important sort of new program this year, the Tree Fest, and Lorraine is going to tell us a little about that.
Hey, everybody, hope you can hear me. I was trying to share my screen. We are, hopefully some of you are familiar with Tree Fest. And it is where various charitable organizations can decorate a tree and put it up for auction. It'll be a silent auction. It'll be at the 4 provinces on December 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And this has been running about 5 years with Melissa Morse was in charge of it, but she's moved out of the area. So the Village Preservation and Improvement Society is going to take over the event. So if you know of any organizations that would like to decorate a tree to be part of it, please have them contact me. My email address is on the bottom of this, what we're showing right now. And if you don't know an organization, we hope you all attend and sign up to get a tree. The trees are only 4 foot tall, so you can actually take them that day without needing them to be undecorated. And it's been a great success in other years, so we're really hoping that we can continue in the tradition that it has been in. And if you have any questions, any thoughts, concerns, please also feel free to reach out on email, and I'll be happy to chat with you about it more.
Great, thank you, Lorraine. Okay, I'd like to go ahead and turn the program over to Mary Chavez to introduce our substantive program for today.
Thanks again, Jeff. Our annual membership meeting this year falls squarely in the midst of the global climate change discussions in Scotland. That conference will help us to set targets for future action by more than 100 countries to address projections of a warming climate that is already causing rising sea levels, extreme heat and drought, severe flooding, spreading wildfires, and increased air pollution. The hope is for the world to get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 and to reduce them by 50% by the end of this decade. Reducing leaks of methane gas and eliminating coal production are particular concerns, given the magnitude of carbon that they release into the atmosphere. Additional efforts to provide billions of dollars of support to developing countries and to assure that the power sector is 100% carbon-free by 2035. Concrete steps for individual nations and communities to do their part are essential to meet this challenge. Tim Stevens, a member of the Falls Church Planning Commission, will address what we can be doing in Falls Church to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Jeff Peterson, president of the Village Society, will then address measures that can help mitigate future stormwater problems within the city. I would ask you to type out your questions for the speakers at the bottom of your screen. We will review the questions to combine similar ones and pose them to the speakers after both presentations are completed. Tim, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Mary. Is the audio okay? All right, good.
Yes, this is fine.
All right. I see, looking at the list of participants, we have several of our city council members here. So welcome to all of you, and also to my fellow planning commissioner, Melissa Teets, who also serves on the VPIS board, I believe. I'm pleased to spend a few minutes with you this afternoon to talk about what actions can be taken within the city to address climate change. And by this, I mean actions needed to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions generated within the 2.2 square miles that we call home. Climate change, to say the least, is a huge problem, not only here, but worldwide. After all, it's been called global warming for a reason. And it's an issue with rather unique challenges. The main culprits causing changes to our climate, carbon dioxide and methane gas, are invisible. Unlike many other pollutants, such as oil spills or smoke from wildfires, we don't see carbon dioxide accumulating in the atmosphere as it's been doing for the last 100 years. And the air won't look any different if emissions are reduced. This lack of feedback is like trying to kick a field goal without a goalpost to tell you how you did. Because greenhouse gas emissions stay in the atmosphere for a very long time, basically a century, it'll take a long time, several generations or more, before actions taken today to reduce emissions will start to show up in global measurements. And because our city is so small, we could reduce our emissions to zero, and it would have no impact on the overall climate. So we're asked to take action and spend money today to give up some of the convenient lifestyle behaviors we've gotten used to in order to benefit future generations, people whom we don't know. It's much easier to get support for taking actions and spending local money on things like increasing affordable housing or installing traffic calming or stormwater mitigation, things we can see and benefit from here and now. Small wonder that only very modest efforts have been made worldwide to reduce emissions. And many of the actions that have been taken have been made on a voluntary basis by relatively few individuals. This is true here in the city, although some of our neighbors have achieved somewhat better results. Our city, like most jurisdictions, has a greenhouse gas inventory performed about every 3 years, and that started in 2005. Since that time, our emissions have declined a little, about 2.5%. Since that, by comparison, Arlington's has declined 24%, Rockville's 21%, Alexandria's and Fairfax City's 18%. And the region's emissions as a whole has declined by about 13%. Our city's population growth rate has been somewhat higher than most other jurisdictions, which provides a partial explanation of why the reduction in our emissions has lagged. Our population growth rate, however, is not that much higher than the other jurisdictions. And so we need to be honest about the need to give more attention to climate change. A better explanation for the slow pace in the reduction of our emissions is that the leading jurisdictions have put more effort and resources into developing overall plans to methodically reduce the emissions within their jurisdictions. For example, Arlington has had a climate action plan incorporated into their comprehensive plan for over 10 years. Our city had its first discussion to develop a climate action plan at a work session several weeks ago. The discussion was sincere, but commitments for action were limited. A tentative plan to complete a climate action plan sometime next year was offered by Kate Walker on the city staff. Historically, a discussion of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions comes before City Council only about once every 3 or 4 years. Some other jurisdictions have added staff and formed organizations specifically tasked to work on reducing energy use and overall emissions in their school systems, their general government, and in their communities at large. This is not to say that the city hasn't undertaken important actions to reduce emissions. For example, plans are underway to replace all of our streetlights with LED streetlights. Our police department has announced plans to purchase 2 electric vehicles, and our school system is scheduled to receive 2 electric buses in the near future. The high school has been designed with the possibility to be net zero with respect to energy use, but this depends on future plans to install solar panels on the roof and on canopies in the parking lot. The schedule for installing the photovoltaic system continued to get delayed, however, and keep in mind that even if the high school were to achieve net zero energy, and that would be an amazing accomplishment if it happens, the reduction would represent less than 1% of the city's overall emissions. One of the best things the city has done from a greenhouse gas emissions perspective is the emphasis on improving walkability, including implementation of a number of mixed-use developments along our commercial streets, which integrate residential, office, and retail, and restaurant, entertainment uses within close proximity, thereby reducing the need to travel somewhere else for our daily needs. Although it's not the effect on greenhouse gas emissions you will hear about as the benefits from these initiatives, rather it's the effect on lowering tax rates and the monetary contributions made to schools, library, affordable housing that make the headlines. So progress in the city towards reducing our emissions has been slow. And when it comes to addressing the urgency of climate change, winning slowly is losing. Reducing our emissions a little is just not enough. So what's the size of the task at hand? Our last greenhouse gas inventory indicated we emit about 150,000 tons of greenhouse gases in the city. And over 90% of that comes from just 2 sources: energy used in buildings and transportation. Knowing this helps keep focus on what we need to be doing here to reduce emissions. Yes, there are sources of emissions outside of buildings and transportation, such as leakage of refrigerants from HVAC systems, incineration of our trash, sewage disposal, and the provision of clean water. And on the other side of the ledger, there are the multiple benefits of our trees, including their ability to remove carbon dioxide. When it comes to greenhouse gas emissions in urban areas such as ours, however, it is mainly about buildings and transportation. For emissions from buildings, we're talking about the energy used to heat, cool, and illuminate our indoor spaces, and the energy used to power up all the things that we plug into our outlets. Reducing the amount of gas and electricity we use is the key thing that we have to do if we want to reduce our emissions. And this is not easy. Yes, on paper, most of us could hire contractors to plug all the gaps in and around our doors, and our windows, and basements, and attics, and replace our windows where that's needed, add insulation, and so forth. But it would generally take a number of years, maybe a decade or more, to recover the upfront cost of those actions from reductions in our utility bills. And most of us just don't want to bother. In commercial buildings, it is usually the tenant who pays the utility bills. So the landlord often doesn't have much of an incentive to make their buildings more energy efficient. To overcome these obstacles, we will need serious financial incentives to modify pricing signals that today do little to cause us to pay attention to the greenhouse gas emissions that we cause. So we're talking about a check from the government in some form to make these energy efficiency upgrades an issue of importance at the household level. And locally, we will need to increase the volume of our voices in asking for building codes to be seriously upgraded to make new buildings as efficient as possible, something the building trade associations will vigorously oppose, as they have successfully done over the past decade. Once the energy efficiency of a building has been made the best it can be, then we need to transition to renewable energy for what we want and need to power our homes and businesses. For houses that have good access to the sun, there will need to be stronger financial incentives for people to install rooftop solar systems. Right now, only about 60 homes in the city have some amount of solar. And while the federal tax credit has helped, well, at least those whose income is high enough to benefit from a credit, there is a strong element of volunteerism exhibited by those who install these systems. Waiting 10 years or more to recover the upfront costs of a solar system will not achieve the pace of adoption that we need. For homeowners who would like solar, but can't install it due to tree shading or design constraints, we'll need to accelerate efforts to develop what are called shared or community solar arrangements. State legislation passed earlier this year in Virginia began to design shared and community solar programs. But various utility companies have succeeded so far in having the prices for these services at such high levels that very few would sign up for them. Our city council should be expressing strong support to our state legislators and utility regulators to make these programs affordable. But I'll say more about advocacy in just a few minutes. Accelerating efforts to clean up the electricity on the grid will be needed to cover those who choose to continue to take electricity from the grid rather than produce their own from a rooftop system. Legislation called the Virginia Clean Economy Act, passed earlier this year, will gradually reduce the emissions from the production of electricity by closing down coal-powered plants, okaying the use of more solar farms, offshore wind, and battery storage to displace electricity produced from natural gas. I'll add that transitioning off of natural gas is a critical step to addressing climate change. With the decline in the use of coal, the major source of greenhouse gas emissions from buildings is either the use of gas directly in gas appliances or from electricity made by the utilities from gas power plants. As you can easily imagine, the companies that supply natural gas spend considerable effort to thwart those who advocate for the transition off of natural gas. Also, as a society, we don't require the price of natural gas to include the cost of all the climate problems the use of gas causes. Those costs are paid by people whose assets and lives are affected directly by climate change. With the improving outlook for cleaner electricity from the grid based on renewable sources, it opens up action to reduce our city's emissions on a couple of fronts. First is the importance of having electric appliances start to displace gas appliances. Homeowners and businesses will need to change out their gas appliances, such as water heaters, dryers, stovetops, to appliances that use electricity. This technology already exists and has improved considerably in the last few years. But here again, strong financial incentives, including from our local government, will be needed. If using electric appliances continues to cost more than gas appliances, then only a few customers will make the change. Doing the right thing has to make financial sense. And this is something that needs to be part of a local climate action plan, and it will cost money. There are approaches to cleaning up the electricity used in our buildings that don't involve financial incentives paid to individuals, but they're more complicated. I'll mention one of these. It involves investing in a solar farm somewhere in the state that connects into the grid that supplies our electricity. This is what Arlington did recently in their partnership with Amazon and Dominion Energy. Arlington takes on some risk by assuring upfront to the solar farm that funds to construct the project to supply those funds. Arlington in turn will earn revenues from the electricity generated by the solar farm. But these revenues will vary day to day based on prices the market pays for electricity. Arlington may make or possibly lose money on the deal. But in exchange for this risk, Arlington will be able to make a large deduction from its greenhouse gas emissions from the clean energy produced by the solar farm. Now I'll pivot to the second major source of greenhouse gas emissions in our city, transportation. We will need to transition from vehicles powered by internal combustion, that is to say, those that use gasoline and diesel, to vehicles powered by cleaner grid electricity. The news is a little better on this front, as momentum is building for people to buy electric vehicles, or EVs. I won't go into the benefits of EVs over internal combustion engines because it almost doesn't matter. People are already finding out for themselves, as evidenced by Tesla's phenomenal growth, that EVs are superior in many ways to internal combustion engines. If federal legislation currently under consideration passes, there could be new credits available for buying an EV. Already existing trends towards buying EVs will no doubt accelerate. This will necessitate a lot of local actions, such as requiring more EV stations by developers and investments by the city into constructing publicly available charging stations to accommodate users who live in older multifamily and lower income buildings. That is to say, residences without garages or their own driveways. Did you know that chargers can be built into streetlights, especially as they convert to LED bulbs? What is needed from the city is an overall plan to transition to EVs that includes programs to convert the city's fleet of vehicles, investments into more publicly available charging stations, and financial incentives from our local government for residents to buy EVs, on top of any federal and state incentives. These are a few elements of what needs to be in such a plan. Now, it's evident that policies to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions are affected by all three levels of government: federal, state, and local. The largest portion by far of our city's emissions, those 150,000 tons of greenhouse gases I mentioned earlier, are affected by policies implemented at the state and federal level of governments rather than by city policies. This means that any serious effort by the city to address our greenhouse gas emissions will need an effective and constant advocacy effort, ideally in partnership with other localities, aimed at urging state and federal governments to adopt climate-friendly laws. In fact, the more climate beneficial policies that can be implemented from the state and federal level, the less we will have to do at a local level. Every December, City Council compiles what is called a legislative program, which is basically a list of laws we want our state legislators to pass. In a Dillon state like Virginia, where local jurisdictions can only do the things the state legislature has allowed through the adoption of legislation, this list of asks is especially important. Historically, the city designates a few of the asks that we make as priority items. We need to designate our most important climate change requests in this priority category, something that's not happened in the past. The city needs to proceed with developing a climate action plan that will coordinate actions to reduce emissions both in our local government and, more importantly, within the community at large, since only about 5% of the city's total emissions are from city government operations. Within our local government, addressing climate needs to be a priority across all city departments. City Council needs to make reducing emissions a regular part of their discussions, and as is the case with other important issues within the city, they will have to track progress and schedule discussions on a regular as opposed to a sporadic basis. The list of voluntary concessions the city routinely negotiates as part of special exception requests needs to be updated to recast the importance of climate change and reducing emissions as an important community benefit. The ways in which we can address climate change are woven throughout the city's operations in ways that might not seem obvious. An example is the city's pension funds, which are invested in mutual funds comprised of companies representative of a number of sectors in our economy. Throughout the US, local governments and many institutions such as colleges and universities, nonprofits, and others are reviewing their investments to begin excluding the companies that produce fossil fuels. As the old saying goes, when you are trying to get out of a hole, the first thing to do is to stop digging. Divestment strategy was an important tool to stop the apartheid regime in South Africa several decades ago. And it's beginning to have a role to play in addressing climate change today. City Council should direct the city's pension board to develop options for divesting firms that produce fossil fuels from our city's pension plans. Above all, we can't continue to address climate change as a business as usual issue. To do so will mean that we won't meet our emissions reduction goals and that our city will have to rely mainly on actions taken at the state and federal level and by our neighboring local governments. Not exactly the leadership image we often have of ourselves. And we can't rely just on voluntary efforts to reduce emissions, as important as those actions are. Imagine President Roosevelt on December 8th, 1941, saying to the American people, "To address the threats of the Axis powers, we ask some of you who can to send us spare funds you have, or if your schedule allows, to sign up for some occasional weekend military duty to learn to fight the Luftwaffe." And with that, I will conclude my comments and thank you again for making climate change a topic of interest within the VPIS organization. And I encourage all of you to continue your efforts to challenge our city government to aim for better environmental policies and practices within our city. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mary.
I am muted. That was wonderful, Tim. Thank you. I will turn to Jeff to talk about stormwater and what we can be doing there. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay,
Excuse me,
thank you, Mary.
Mary. Excuse me for just a second. Are we, I'm not able to type in questions. Are we able to, are we going to have a question and answer period? Because I have a couple of questions for Tim.
We were aiming to hold the questions until after both speakers.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Well, great. Tim gave us a really great overview of the challenges that Falls Church faces with respect to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. One of the biggest consequences of a warming planet is a changing precipitation as well as temperatures. And in Falls Church, we're seeing that in the form of additional, more intense rainfall. And one of the key ideas that the Village Preservation and Improvement Society has been looking at to help with the problems associated with the more intense rainfall associated with climate change is how we can expand the use of green infrastructure as part of a package of remedies to reduce the impacts of stormwater. So today I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some key aspects of the stormwater problem in the city of Falls Church, the important work that the city's doing to maintain the city sewers so that they function effectively, a quick review of the effort that the Village Society is implementing with the city called the Rain Smart program, and then just quickly identify a couple of other green infrastructure options and next steps. So I think everyone's pretty familiar with the stormwater impacts, obviously damage to homes, but there's a nuisance frustration and sort of a psychological impact of stormwater that is increasingly, I think, causing people to be concerned and want to see solutions. Stormwater also has water quality issues and generates damage to downstream, to streams and to downstream communities. So the city of Falls Church is lucky to have some really wonderful streams and related water resources, and gives us a challenge to managing the stormwater that comes in through both the 4 Mile and Trips Run watersheds. And as I said, the changes in Falls Church are contributing to the stormwater problem. We have both a rapid development Now about 45% of Falls Church is impervious surface, and our population is increasing. By 2045, we're expected to be at considerably more than our 13,000, about 20,000 people. And climate change, more extreme storms, and more rainfall that I mentioned earlier contributing as well. So the worst flooding is looks like this. Local picture on Broad Street causes lots of damage. And really the city has been, I think, pretty effective in wanting to upgrade and expand the attention that we are giving to maintaining our storm sewers to help reduce that kind of flooding. And there are some real advantages to keeping the storm sewers up and running well. It's a very effective way of reducing flooding. It's predictable, and it's sort of a manageable engineering solution. And right now it's funded through the city's impervious surface fees that we all pay based on the amount of impervious surface on our property. There are, however, some cons on the other side of the equation. These projects tend to be pretty costly. They do move water through the city, but of course they just push it downstream to other jurisdictions. Often we are collecting pollutants and depositing them in the streams. And the high volume of flow from heavy storm events through the storm sewers can actually damage local streams. But we are working hard to get sewers upgrade projects in place. The 6 projects that are in the planning and design phase are listed here. There are some additional projects that have been identified sort of for a phase 2. But this is a multi-million-dollar enterprise, something in the neighborhood of $7 million for the first round of projects. Green infrastructure, on the other hand, is a little more focused on the problem of how to get rainfall to soak into the ground where it falls. And the Rain Smart program is kind of dedicated to doing that. So part of it is modeled after the successful program in Arlington County. We have very happy to have a memorandum of understanding with the City of Falls Church to provide funding to help these grants, to make these grants to residents for projects related to stormwater management. And the projects include things like rain barrels. We'll offer a rain barrel for a grant for $50 per rain barrel. And it's a pretty simple process, and we've done many of these to date. And rain gardens, which are nice additions to the landscape, but they also help the water that falls on property to stay on the property, not go into a neighbor's yard and not go into the city sewers. So those are really valuable as well. So we've done altogether now over 50 rain barrels, and it's actually more like 7, I think, soon to be 8 rain gardens through the program. A modest effort, but we hope to continue it in future years and continue to make a difference. But there are other opportunities for stormwater management, including things like green streets, green parking lots, and green roofs. So green streets kind of look like this. They have a green buffer or a swale between the street and the sidewalk. And they have catchment areas that are prepared to absorb water rather than have it all immediately go straight into the storm sewer systems. Here's another example along the side of a street. And green parking lots where rainwater is detained on the parking lot rather than just flowing straight off the parking lot into the storm sewers. Here are a couple of other examples. And I think everyone's heard about green roofs, but again, we have a lot of new major commercial development, and it's a great opportunity to use that large surface space on the top of the buildings so that we hold as much stormwater as possible. Here's another example. So earlier this year, in March, the Stormwater Task Force reported to City Council on some of its work, and included the recommendation that we not only continue to make important improvements to the storm sewer system, but that we also consider green infrastructure options in our future investments and in our planning to address stormwater. And so the Village Society is supporting that recommendation. The Village Society wrote to the council in September of this year and proposed that the city support both upgrading the sewer system and green infrastructure projects, that we create a stormwater commission to help lead that effort, and that we seek input from a new stormwater commission before we make changes to the rate structure of the impervious surface fees that we're now paying. So with that, I'll leave you with a couple of great websites where you can learn a lot more about this problem, and I'll close it on that and turn it back to Mary.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate both of our speakers who have helped to outline ideas and concepts, but also actions that we might take in the future. I don't see any Q's and A's that have come in. Here's one. From
Martha Cooper.
No, this is one, and let me read it. I live in the Virginia Forest part of Falls Church. At least 4 healthy mature trees, which were part of a grove, were removed during the pandemic for a development company to come in and build the biggest house. The law required that they bury a giant tank to take care of the runoff from rainfall. What action can we take to affect the laws that give development companies or individuals freedom to remove mature trees? Getting rid of the grass and lawns is one effort that we can make a huge difference, replacing the grass with native perennials.
Well, I'll take that one. I think, yes, doing landscaping, as she mentioned, is a really constructive thing to do. The Village Society has always argued for preserving trees, planting new trees, but particularly preserving mature trees. So we're always sorry to see any mature trees lost to a development project, and we'd like to see that minimized in the future as much as possible. And we're hoping to work with the city on that in the future.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Allison, you have a question. Do you want to unmute?
Thank you. My question is about solar panels on houses. I am not a subject matter expert on solar panels, but I have heard anecdotally over the years that when it comes time to sell a house, it can be challenging if the seller purchased solar panels for the house and they were either leased from the company or financed using the house as collateral or financed with an unsecured loan. Bottom line being that the solar panels do not convey with the house. The solar panels are owned by a third party and have to be paid for, or the lease has to be paid off before the house can transfer. This, I don't know if this is still true. I'm hoping, Tim, you might be up to date on that, but I do know that it's a complication that sellers might not want to have to deal with. They might have planned to stay in the house for the length of time it would take to pay off the panels, and then they can't. Certainly, it can affect their their profit from the sale of the house, if there is profit. I don't know how much it costs to put solar panels on a house, but my assumption is that it's about the same price as buying a new car. I may be wrong about that. But it's complicated because the panels are owned by a third party. They're not owned by the seller. So Tim, do you have an update, and what can we do to make that easier?
Sure. I'm not a subject matter expert, but I could certainly share anecdotally what I've heard on that. And before I do that, Mary, I just want to share that in the answered part of the Q&A, there's a couple of questions there from a Martha Cooper, and I'm happy to address those as well. But yes, Allison, I think you're correct. If somebody leases their solar panels, it introduces a big complication, not only from the standpoint of when it comes time to sell the house, but also from the standpoint, I believe, in getting the federal tax credit. It's not clear that leases kind of result in the same ability to get that credit as it is when you purchase it outright. And you mentioned about the cost of the solar system costing as much as a vehicle. And I would have said 5 or 10 years ago, that's true. Fortunately, those prices have come down quite a bit. And while it's still not a casual expenditure, the average person, the last time I saw any figures, will spend anywhere from $10,000 to $14,000 for a PV system. So that certainly puts it not that much higher than if somebody has to, let's say, replace 2 HVAC systems. A lot of places have two of those systems, and if you had to replace them all at once, you'd probably wind up spending about as much as you would for a rooftop solar system. It's not to diminish the costs of these, and that's kind of why the theme of my talk was basically is we need to figure out a way to overcome how things are priced today, whether it comes from energy efficiency or renewable energy. These things have to be perceived by the average homeowner as the most cost-effective way to proceed if we want to get changes on a mass basis.
Thank you, Tim. I would hate for a new homeowner in Falls Church City to, or even an existing established homeowner to not put solar panels on. They might want to put, I'm glad to hear the cost has come down. But if the financing, how are we going to pay for this situation is a barrier to entry for putting solar panels on a house, what can the Village Society or City Council do from an education perspective, possibly from working with local vendors to try to find out the ones that might make it easier, since the people who put the solar panels on are the ones who control what happens when the house is sold. Don't know if anybody from City Council is still on the call, but I think complications with financing and making that easier could make it easier for people to actually put the solar panels on.
That's a big ask.
Tell it like I see it.
And Tim,
you're no slouch in these areas. What thoughts do you have on Allison's question?
Jeff?
He might be frozen at the moment.
No, I think that's an important question and something that is going to take some considerable attention as we go forward. But I think that the model that you were talking about with respect to community solar and solar projects on a larger scale than individual residences is another option to look at that kind of sidesteps those problems.
Yeah, there's also the issue, not only cost, but timing. It really doesn't make sense to put a rooftop solar system on if you're within, let's say 10 or 12 years of needing to repair your roof or replace your roof, because they'll have to take the panels off, and that gets to be rather expensive while they put the new roof on. But yeah, the community solar is, I think, going to be an important alternative for people, even in Falls Church, where we have a lot of tree cover. It's only about 20 to 25% of the houses have good solar exposure to put on a PV system. So we're going to need other ways for people to take advantage of solar energy that go beyond or outside of putting it physically on their own roof. Mary, did you have a chance to see those two questions from Martha Cooper, or would you like me to read them?
If you can read them, I don't know that I see them here.
It's under the answered part of the Q&A. There's a couple of options up at the top.
Oh, I see.
Well, they're good questions. It says the high school has geothermal air heating and cooling. Surely that decreases its electricity use. And yes, it does. And it's a great system if you have a chance to take the tour over at Meridian, to go down on the lowest level in a closet back towards the sports fields. And it gives you an idea of the size and kind of the massing of these geothermal systems. It was quite a commitment on the part of the high school to go ahead and install that system. But yes, it absolutely will decrease electricity use. Although in the short term, and I asked the engineer who's been advising the school whether they've seen any results so far. And the answer is not that much, because during the COVID period, where they want to keep the air circulation up high to reduce the chances of infection, they've actually been running the school systems to circulate the air at a much higher than normal system. And those systems use a lot of electricity. So, and also the new school is quite a bit bigger than the older school. But I'm anticipating that for not only the geothermal system, but just the better quality construction that went into that building, that we should see reduced electricity bills and benefiting from that versus the old George Mason School in very near term. One measure of that is this metric called energy use intensity. For the old George Mason High School, that number was about 90 or 95. And keep in mind that EUI, the lower the number, the better. So for the new Meridian High School, it's designed at about 21 or 22 EUI. So there will be considerable efficiency savings as a result of that geothermal system. Second question is, does solar power in townhouse parking lots make sense? And yes, I think it does. The challenge is going to be that most townhouses are part of an HOA, or homeowners association. And there are generally rules in the overall declaration. That's the legal document that establishes the kind of basic ground rules for the homeowners association. May have restrictions on what goes in a public parking space. The state did pass legislation a couple of years ago that makes it easier for townhouse owners who want to put on a solar system on the roof. Because for a while, a lot of HOAs were just saying, no, we don't want them. And the state legislature said it takes a little bit more thorough analysis than just simply saying we don't like the looks of them to deny a townhouse owner the right to put a system on their roof. But parking lots and canopies, that's still kind of a brave new world, but it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next 4 or 5 years. And that's all I see.
Okay, and there's a question from Dave Gustafson for Jeff. We've all seen dozens of recent residential teardowns, and there will be many more in the city's future. Arlington is starting to implement ways that new, bigger homes retain the first 3 inches of rain on site in exchange for quicker permits in some cases. What would you like to see done in the city with both residential teardowns and requirements for new commercial sites? Is there anything you'd like to see done with large existing impervious surfaces such as parking lots?
So yes, on the question of residential tear downs and new commercial sites, while VPIS doesn't have a formal position on that at this point, I think one thing that we would certainly want to look at is enforcement of the current standards and code requirements to make sure that those are being fully and effectively implemented. In addition, I think VPIS has a long history, as I said earlier, of being particularly concerned about trees and protecting mature trees. So options that we might have to make sure that when you go in for a tear down, that a lot isn't cleared fence line to fence line of any vegetation, including any trees, and that better tree protection is implemented. In terms of large existing impervious surfaces, such as parking lots, which Falls Church has quite a number of those, and I think there is a potential for the city to work with the owners of those parking lots to talk about joint investment in practices that would help retain some of the water on the site for some period of time, and that would involve either a rain garden or some other stormwater detention type structure. It might be possible to make that to adjust the impervious surface fee, for instance, that is now being paid in exchange for owners stepping forward with an interest in putting some measures in place to help deal with stormwater from those large parking lots. And of course, as parking lots are redeveloped or new parking lots are implemented, that would be another opportunity to try and implement those stormwater management practices.
Thank you, Jeff. We have another question here. This would be for Tim. Can you speak to solar co-ops as being a way to explore different solar companies, educate and bring costs down for those seeking a solar option?
Yes, Mr. Anonymous. Solar co-ops are a very useful way to do just as you explained there, educate and bring costs down for those seeking a solar option. In fact, our neighbors, Arlington, have been using a solar co-op for about the last 5 years. In the city, we've been using a program called Solarize, and it functions in a very similar way. It used to be that there was more of a difference between a co-op and a program like Solarize. The solar co-op requiring more hands-on involvement on the part of individuals to volunteer to look at contracts and all of those kind of detailed things. But the way these two have evolved over the last few years, there's not that much difference between a Solarize and a co-op. I don't know that they're going to result in a huge savings for individuals, but one thing that they will do that I think is very valuable, and that is to help vet a particular set of contractors so that you can be fairly confident as a homeowner who doesn't deal with trying to procure a solar system every day of the week, to know that that you can trust the contractor that you're working with and that the price that they're offering is a fair price. So those are pretty valuable benefits. The only downside that I would quickly add is that people who tend to use the solar co-op or even our Solarize here in the city, as I mentioned in my talk, we only have about 60 takers of that program. It just tends to be a few people who are volunteers or are very interested in solar. It doesn't get at the broad swath of houses that we have. And so that's the only challenge with the system that we have today.
Okay, are there any other questions from the panelists, or I think we've covered those from the audience. And I think we've had a wonderful discussion here, presentations from Tim and Jeff on two very important issues. If there are no further questions, I will take this opportunity to wrap up our discussion and to thank you all for coming to this fall membership meeting of VPIS. And those of you that are interested in more, follow us online, check out our website, and we will have further for you in the coming months. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
So